Buckle up, everybody, because today we're diving into some seriously intense biblical prophecy from the book of Revelation.
Ooh,
Yeah, we're talking specifically chapter 16,
okay.
which is all about the seven bowls of God's wrath. And I'll tell you, the imagery is, well, it's not for the faint of heart. Let's
Yeah.
just put it that way. We're using an online study guide from a website called MCS for this one.
MCS.
Yeah, it seems like they might be connected to a podcast called The Olive Grove.
Interesting.
Yeah, but before we get too deep into this, I gotta ask.
Yeah.
Have you ever come across this concept of the seven bowls before?
That's a pretty powerful image, isn't it? It might be new to some folks, yeah.
Right. It's not exactly something you bring up over coffee.
You.
So chapter 15 kind of sets the stage, with these bowls being given to angels to pour out on the earth.
Right.
And when I say pour out, I mean like unleash some serious consequences. I'm already getting chills.
You know what's interesting to me is how these bowls tie back to the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Like specifically rituals in the temple.
Oh.
Yeah. Back then, bowls were used in ceremonies involving atonement, making things right with God.
Oh, so are you saying these bowls of wrath are like a twisted version of those rituals?
Exactly. Like a dark reflection,
Why?
showing what happens when you don't make things right.
Like a this is what happens when you don't make things right kind of situation.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's like the flip side of rejecting God's grace.
Okay, that's definitely giving me a whole new perspective on this. It's not just about punishment, it's about the consequences of choices.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's get into these bowls one by one. The first one, according to our source, unleashes some pretty nasty, painful sores on those who follow the beast. I'm no biblical scholar or anything, but I'm guessing the beast isn't exactly a good thing.
You got it. The beast represents the forces opposed to God in Revelation. And those sores, well, they bring to mind the plagues of Egypt, described in Exodus.
Oh, right.
Like, remember the boils that struck the Egyptians?
Yeah, I'm starting to see a pattern here. Divine judgment often seems to involve some pretty unpleasant physical ailments.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Makes you think, are these just physical afflictions, or are they symbolic of something deeper, like a spiritual sickness, maybe?
Whoa, that's a good point. Okay, so it's not just about the surface level suffering, but a deeper consequence. Okay, bowl number 2. This one is pretty graphic. The sea turns into blood. And not just any blood, the source specifies, like, the blood of a dead person. Ugh, that's an image I won't soon forget.
Yeah, it's definitely meant to shock. And if we think about the symbolism, the sea often represents the nations of the world in biblical literature.
Right.
So this blood-red sea could be a powerful way of showing the devastating consequences of rejecting God.
Yeah, it's like the lifeblood of the world is being corrupted, literally poisoned by their choices. Okay, bowl number 3. This one doesn't let up on the intensity. Now all the freshwater sources turn to blood too. Water is essential for life, so this is a pretty big deal.
Absolutely. This ramps up the stakes significantly.
Yeah.
It's not just a symbolic gesture anymore, it's a direct threat to survival. And what's even more intriguing is the mention of an angel of the waters.
Wait, an angel of the waters? What's that about?
Well, it suggests that even the natural elements are under the control of spiritual beings,
Yeah.
carrying out God's will. This angel actually praises God for this judgment, saying, "You are just in these judgments of yours."
Wow, so there's like a whole other level of cosmic forces at play here. It's like even in the face of these catastrophic events, there's a sense of divine justice being carried out.
Yeah.
Okay, on to bowl number 4. And this one might hit a little close to home for us today. Scorching heat from the sun. I mean, with all the talk about climate change, it's kind of eerie how relevant this feels.
Yeah, it definitely resonates with some contemporary anxieties. But it's important to remember that the source frames this heat as a direct result of God's judgment,
Right.
not human actions. So while we might see parallels to our own world, the context here is quite different.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that we're looking at this through a specific lens, the lens of Revelation. But even in the midst of this intense heat, our source emphasizes that people still refuse to repent. They actually curse God instead of turning to him.
It's a recurring theme in Revelation. Even in the face of, undeniable consequences.
Yeah.
Humanity's stubbornness and refusal to change.
It's a sobering thought. All right, moving on to bowl number 5. This one plunges the beast's kingdom into total darkness.
And darkness in the Bible often symbolizes the absence of God. It's not just about the lack of light, but the lack of truth, the lack of understanding.
So it's not just a physical darkness, but a spiritual one too. Like those who choose to follow the beast are choosing a path that leads them further and further away from God's light. I'm starting to understand why these bowls are called wrath. It's not just about punishment, it's about the natural consequences of rejecting God.
That's a really insightful observation. And it leads us perfectly into the sixth bowl, which really starts to ramp up the action. The Euphrates River dries up, and the source tells us this is to prepare the way for kings from the east. Now, the Euphrates was a major river, a natural barrier. Imagine it suddenly vanishing.
Whoa, that would change everything. Armies could move freely, trade routes would be disrupted, whole civilizations would be impacted. It's like setting the stage for a massive conflict.
Exactly. And that's precisely what's happening here. The drying up of the Euphrates signals that the final confrontation is drawing near. The stage is set, the players are in position. And just when you think things can't get any weirder, we get a little interlude before the seventh bowl. Our source introduces 3 unclean spirits that look like frogs.
Okay, frog spirits. This is where I start to get a little lost.
Don't worry, it's not as strange as it sounds. These spirits symbolize demonic forces that work to deceive the world and rally people against God.
So it's like a spiritual propaganda campaign, spreading lies and turning people away from the truth. And the frog imagery, is that significant?
Absolutely. In the Bible, frogs are often associated with plagues and uncleanliness. So it's a fitting symbol for these deceptive forces that are corrupting the world.
Okay, that makes sense. So these frog spirits are spreading their message of deception, and they gather the kings of the entire world at a place called Har-Megiddo.
Which is better known as Armageddon.
Whoa! Okay, Armageddon. Now that's a name that carries some serious weight. I mean, when you hear that word, you immediately think end of the world epic battle, good versus evil kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, it's become a cultural shorthand for any kind of apocalyptic scenario. And the source doesn't shy away from that association. This is where the final showdown is going to take place, the climax of the entire book.
And right before we get to that epic showdown, the seventh bowl, there's a very pointed reminder from our source. Look, I am coming like a thief. How blessed are those who stay alert and keep their clothes clean so that they won't be walking naked and be publicly put to shame.
It's a stark reminder about the suddenness of Christ's return and the importance of being spiritually prepared.
It's like a final warning shot. Are you ready? Are you paying attention?
And then, bam, the seventh bowl is unleashed.
And you're telling me things get even crazier from here.
Oh, you have no idea. We're talking about a level of chaos and devastation that's almost unimaginable.
All right, well, I'm ready to hear it. Bring on the apocalypse.
So the seventh bowl, it's described as being poured out into the air. And that's when things get really wild.
Okay, I'm officially on the edge of my seat. What happens?
Well, our source paints a truly apocalyptic picture. You've got flashes of lightning, deafening thunder, a massive earthquake unlike anything the world has ever seen. It's like the earth itself is convulsing.
Wow. I mean, we've already seen some pretty intense stuff with the previous bowls, but this sounds like it's on a whole other level.
It is. And it gets even more specific. The great city, which our source tells us refers to Babylon, is split into 3 parts. Other cities around the world crumble, islands, vanish, mountains disappear. It's complete and utter destruction.
It's like the whole world is being reshaped, literally torn apart by this judgment.
Exactly. And as if that wasn't enough, gigantic hailstones, each weighing 70 pounds, rain down from the sky.
70 pounds? That's like having a refrigerator falling on your head.
It's a final devastating blow, emphasizing the overwhelming power of this judgment.
But here's what I don't get. Even after all this, the swords, the blood, the hail, the earthquakes, people still curse God. I mean, what does it take to get through to these people?
It is a difficult concept to grasp. And it raises some profound questions about the nature of free will and the limits of even divine intervention. But remember, Revelation is written in a highly symbolic language.
Right.
It's not meant to be a literal play-by-play of future events.
So how should we understand this stubborn refusal to repent, even in the face of such overwhelming judgment?
I think it speaks to the power of deception, the grip that the beast has on people's hearts and minds.
Yeah.
Even when confronted with undeniable evidence of God's power, they remain blinded by their allegiance to the forces of evil.
That's a chilling thought. It's like they're so deeply entrenched in their darkness that they can't even see the light, even when it's literally shaking the world around them.
Exactly. And it reminds us that this battle between good and evil isn't just some abstract theological concept. It's a reality that plays out in each of our lives, in the choices we make every day.
So even though we're talking about these epic apocalyptic events, there's a personal message here too. Like, we're all facing these choices between light and darkness, even in our everyday lives.
Absolutely. Revelation might be full of dramatic imagery and symbolism, but at its core, it's a story about the consequences of our choices and the ultimate triumph of good over evil.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Revelation chapter 16. We've covered a lot of ground, but there's always more to explore. I encourage you to check out the full chapter on your own and see what other insights you can glean from it. And if this deep dive has sparked your curiosity about Revelation or biblical prophecy in general, there are tons of resources available online and in libraries. Don't be afraid to dive in and explore.
And remember, the more we understand these ancient texts, the better equipped we are to navigate the complexities of our own world and to live lives that are aligned with the values of justice, compassion, and hope.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep seeking knowledge, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.